Once again, this is an opportunity to just share with you guys a little bit more about private money financing. We actually had one of our associates come to us and ask us about how we could be able to help facilitate utilizing private money to invest in real estate. Some of the questions that they had were: one, how much money do you generally need? Two, what's the term in which their money is utilized? So is it a 1 year term, 2 year term, 5, 7, 30 year term? And then when does the investor ultimately get their money and how is it structured? So I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about that now. Hopefully this will help you guys moving forward in your business. So first and foremost, when you ask for private money, it's just like a normal loan. There's always terms. So generally speaking, we've got a loan amount. We've got a term in which how long the money will actually be loaned, and then ultimately we have what the interest rate is. So we've got amount, and let's just say in your case we talked about 500,000, right? So we said $500,000 investment over a term, and right now we're going to call that X number of years. And then they want to know what is the interest rate. So we're going to say X interest. And finally, we're talking about repayment. So first and foremost, the amount is easy. So what we ultimately want to do is we want to figure out how much are they able to invest? How much money do they have liquid or available that they can actually feel comfortable in investing? And sometimes what we want to do is we want to ask for the amount that will ultimately be necessary to fund our project. So for example, if we've got a house that's cost $500,000, then clearly we need a $500,000 investment if we wanted to buy cash. However, and not to confuse you guys with things, but one of the things that we could do is if we got a $500,000 investment and we put that $500,000 investment into houses where we only had to put 10% down. So if we could do a 10% down payment, which would mean that we're getting 90% financing from another source, that would mean that we would have 10% of 500,000 equals 50,000. That equals 50,000. And with that $50,000, we could then purchase 10 houses. Does that make sense? So depending on how we want to use it, we can use it in different ways. But right now we're going to stick with a very simple example. We're just going to talk about buying one house with $500,000. And let's just assume that includes everything. That's the price of the property. That's your closing cost to buy the property. That's whatever improvements that you have to make to the property in order to ultimately get your return from it. Okay? So your term is really set by both parties. When I say both parties, I mean you as the person that's going to be borrowing the money, and then the person that's actually lending the money. Now, depending on what type of a relationship you have with that person, you can either choose to do one of two things. You can either say, I need the money for this amount of time. So, for example, I need $500,000 for 2 years or for a year. Sometimes if you're going to do a fix and flip, you know what a fix and flip is? Meaning that you're going to fix the property up and you're going to resell it for profit. You might only need it for 6 months. But whatever your necessary term is, you ultimately want to try to ask for that if you're setting the tone. However, if you're in the business of real estate investment and someone says that they're willing to give you that $500,000 for a longer term, you might want to negotiate having that $500,000 available for more time, right? So you might have that $500,000 for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever the case might be. You would allow them to stipulate how long they want it out and what their ultimate terms would be. So that's how the amount will work. Now, terms again is just the number, really the number of the amount of time that you utilize a loan. So that could either be, like we talked about in our examples, that could be 6 months, that could be 1 year, that could be 10 years, that could be 20 years or 30, right? It's all negotiable. The beautiful thing about private money, it's not like a traditional mortgage. You go to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, they're going to specify what the terms are to you. It's a 30-year loan. It's at 5% interest, and you need to pay it by the first of the month. If it's not given to you by the 15th, it's late. You got a late penalty. If you know, so they spell all of that stuff out. So interest rate. Let's talk about that. Really, at the end of the day, it's everything again is negotiable. Do you guys have any idea what the interest rate is today in the market if you just had your money in a mutual fund or something like that, savings accounts, a CD, or something like that? Right now, it's actually less than 3% in most cases. I mean, many people are only getting a percent and a half on their money. So if they were to get anything above and beyond that, they'd be pretty happy with it. Someone might be happy with a 3% return because right now they're only getting 1.5% in their savings account or in their CD. Other people might be a little bit more savvy. They might know how real estate works. They might have invested in real estate before. They might say, I want at least a 10% return. Some people might say, you know what, I'm getting 10% right now on my own investments. In order for me to invest with you, I'm going to need at least a 15% return. Irrespective of what the need is, what you want to obviously do is first of all, I would highly recommend as the investor to be, or as the real estate investor, is to always let your private money investor tell you what they want. Don't do it the other way around. Don't say I can give you 15% on your money. What you want to do is say how much of a return would be ideal for you. What would make you feel good if I were able to give you a nice return on your money? And like I said, you might get 3%, you might get 5%, you might get 10, you might get 15. Who knows? But all of these are better returns than the 1.5% that they're currently getting in the market, right? If that's what they're getting. So we want to let them specify what their interest rate is, and we want to specify, and we want to figure out what their term is. Once you figured all of that out, then the end of the term is when the loan is repaid. So if the term is 6 months, it needs to be repaid in 6 months. If it's in 1 year, it needs to be returned in 1 year, and so forth. So if that's the case, what you have to make sure of as a real estate investor is that you're able to repay that entire amount plus whatever interest you've agreed upon within that certain amount of time. So this might be okay if you know that you're going to buy a property, you're going to turn it around for a quick sale, and you don't have to worry about it. You might be fine with the 6 months, right? If it's something that you're going to buy and hold, what you might want to do is you do it for 10 years, and then at the 10-year mark, you have to repay them. Now, how do you think you might want to repay them? There's a couple of different ways that you can do it. You can either sell the property, you can refinance the property. Refinance basically meaning that you get a new loan on it, maybe through a traditional lender. But that's kind of how it ultimately works. Last thing I'm going to talk to you about is how the interest is amortized. Actually, you know what we'll do? We'll save that for the next video. But that just kind of gives you a sense of how that ultimately works. When the repayment is done, your deal is done. But you obviously want to make sure that they've got their principal and they've got their interest and they get their principal back within the appropriate time. Hope that helps. Thanks you very much.